The air inside the chamber was heavy, like the weight of a storm pressing down on every breath. Pale blue light ran in glowing veins through the crystal walls, pulsing slowly, like the heartbeat of a giant. The sound of boots echoed sharply as a single human walked down the long aisle between rows of guards. Daniel kept his head high. His wrists were bound with bands of silver metal that hummed softly, cutting into his skin whenever he shifted. He had been dragged across the stars, chained inside a ship that felt more alive than built, and now he stood in the center of a hall that looked more like a temple than a throne room. Every step forward was watched. The guard were tall, elegant, and terrible to behold. Their armor clung to their slender frames like flowing glass, and their long weapons glowed faintly at the tips. Their alien faces were calm, but their eyes, sharp silver and unblinking, followed him like hawks ready to strike. At the far end, a throne rose up from the floor. It looked as if the stone itself had grown into a seat shaped by nature's will. From its high back curved delicate ridges of crystal, glowing faintly, as though fire lived deep inside. And seated upon it was the one they all feared, the alien queen. She was taller than any human woman, her form elegant yet frightening. Her skin shimmered with colors that shifted in the light, shades of violet, silver, and deep blue flowing across her as though alive. Her crown was not worn but part of her, ridges sweeping back from her head like the spines of some great celestial creature, and her eyes, cold silver radiant, locked on Daniel with a weight that pressed down harder than chains. At her side stood her daughter, Princess Illyra. She was smaller than the queen, but no less striking. Her beauty was different, softer, calmer. While her mother's glow commanded obedience, Illyra's presence drew the heart. Her skin carried faint markings along her cheekbones that shimmered gently. Her hair, long and silken, floated slightly in the faint current that moved through the hall. And her eyes, unlike her mother's piercing silver, glowed faintly violet, warm, gentle, almost human in their tenderness. Illyra's gaze never left Daniel. Though her posture was strong, her expression betrayed the storm within her. Worry, fear, and hope tangled together. The queen lifted one hand, and instantly the hall fell silent. Not a whisper dared linger. Her voice filled the chamber, sharp and commanding, as if the walls themselves obeyed her. "Human," she said, her tone hard as iron, "you have been brought before me for your crime. You dare to claim affection for my daughter. You dare to speak of love with her. You dare to imagine yourself worthy of the blood of the Zyri. For this, your life hangs by a thread thinner than silk." The guards shifted, their weapons tightening against his chest. But Daniel did not bow. He straightened his shoulders, forcing his lungs to draw steady breaths. His heart pounded like a drum, but he kept his voice calm. "I love her," Daniel said. The words carried across the chamber, like a stone dropped into still water. Gasps and hisses rippled through the court. Several guards moved as if to strike. But the queen raised her hand again and all froze. Her glowing eyes narrowed, studying him like a predator weighing its prey. "You dare to speak so boldly?" she asked, her tone low and sharp. "Do you not see that your words place you at death's door? That with a single command, your heart could stop beating in your chest?" Daniel's eyes flicked toward Illyra, just for a heartbeat. Her gaze met his, trembling with fear, and for that moment, courage filled him. He turned back to the queen. "I see it," he said. His voice was steady, though his throat felt dry. "But I will not take back the truth." A silence deeper than any before filled the chamber. Even the humming of the crystal walls seemed to fade. The queen rose from her throne. Slowly, powerfully, her tall frame cast shadows that stretched like claws across the chamber floor. Her glowing ridges flared faintly as she stepped closer, her gaze locked on like a blade aimed for his soul. "Then speak, human," she commanded. "If you truly mean to stand by your words, tell me why. Why do you love her? What is it you see in her that makes you risk death? What binds your weak heart to her? Choose your answer carefully, for every breath you have left depends on the truth." Daniel's throat tightened. He felt the weight of every gaze in the chamber pressing against him, waiting for him to falter. But in that crushing silence, he remembered every moment with Illyra, the quiet laughter they shared, the way she listened, the way she believed in something more than endless war between their peoples. He raised his eyes to the queen, refusing to look away. I love your daughter because she is not just your heir, not just a symbol of power or blood, he said, his voice carrying strong and clear. I love her because she is kind in a world that worships cruelty, because she listens when no one else does, because she is brave enough to dream of peace. She is not only a princess, she is herself, and it is her true self that I love. Nothing can change that. Not your throne, not your laws, not even death. The chamber froze. Even the guards who had been ready to strike lowered their weapons, stunned by the weight of his words. The queen stared at him, unblinking, unbreathing, as if time itself had stopped. And for the first time in memory, the queen of the Zyri was left without words. The silence in the chamber felt endless. Daniel stood frozen in place, his chest rising and falling with sharp breaths, his eyes never leaving the queen's silver gaze. Around him, the alien guards stood like statues, their armor glowing faintly in the blue light. The entire court was waiting for her judgment. The queen of the Zyri rose slowly from her throne. The crystal ridges of her crown shimmered as she moved, her tall, elegant frame casting shadows that stretched like claws across the glowing floor. When she spoke, her voice was smooth but heavy with power, filling the vast chamber. You speak with courage, human, she said, her eyes sharp as blades. But courage is only the spark before fire. Words are wind, and wind alone cannot shake the mountains. If you claim to love my daughter, then prove it, not with words, with action, with your life. Daniel's throat tightened. His fists clenched inside the restraints that bound his wrists. Prove it? How? The queen moved closer, circling him like a predator testing its prey. Her silver gaze never wavered. My daughter is heir to the throne that rules across 1,000 stars. She is born of strength. She is shaped by the trials of our people. If you dare to stand beside her, you must endure what every warrior of the Zyri endures. Trial by truth, trial by danger. You will face what cannot be faked. If you live, perhaps your words carry weight. If you fall, your bones will rest in silence, and she will learn the pain of a heart led astray. Aelira stepped forward. Her violet eyes shone with panic. Mother, no, she cried, her voice breaking the still air. He is not of our kind. He cannot. Enough? The queen snapped, her command shaking the very walls. The pulse of the chamber's glowing veins quickened, as if the room itself obeyed her will. Do not question me, daughter. Love does not shield. Love does not excuse weakness. If this human dares to speak of love, then let him stand as a warrior or fall as prey. Aelira froze, her chest rising and falling, her hands trembling at her sides. She turned to Daniel, her lips parting, but no words came. Daniel looked at her for only a moment, then gave the smallest shake of his head. He did not want her to beg for him. He did not want her to save him. If this was a trial, then it was his to face. He turned back to the queen. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded so loud he thought the whole chamber might hear. Then I'll take your trial. The queen's gaze narrowed, and for the first time there was the faintest glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. She lifted her arm. The floor beneath Daniel began to shift. Thin cracks of white light spread like spiderwebs across the smooth stone. With a deep grinding sound, the floor opened, its pieces folding back like petals of giant flower. From the depths below, a massive platform rose. A heavy mist spilled around it, glowing faintly in the chamber's light. And on that platform stood a creature that froze the breath in Daniel's lungs. It was huge, taller than 3 men, its body rippling with muscle underplates of glossy, black armor-like skin. For arms ended in clawed hands, each claw long and sharp as a dagger. Its head was long and narrow, with a jaw that split open to reveal rows of teeth that gleamed with wet light. Its glowing orange eyes burned like fire. The sound of its breathing rattled like chains being dragged over stone. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the court. The guards shifted but did not move to intervene. None would dare. The queen's voice cut through the air like ice. This is a Vorderach, she said. A beast bred for war. It does not reason. It does not fear. Our young face it as their rite of passage into adulthood. Few survive. Those who do earn the right to be called warrior. Now, human, you will face it. If you survive, your claim of love may yet hold truth. If you die, your words will be forgotten. Daniel's eyes stayed locked on the beast. His stomach twisted with fear, but he forced his face to remain calm. The Vortorok's claws scraped the floor, sending sparks flying, its chest heaving as it roared. The sound shook the chamber so hard that even the crystal walls seemed to shiver. He looked once more at Aelira. Her face was pale, her hands gripping the rail in front of her mother's throne until her knuckles turned white. Her violet eyes shone with tears she could not shed here, not before her people. Daniel turned back to the queen. You want me to fight this thing? Her lips curved in the faintest smile, a smile without warmth. If you love her human, you will not ask again. You will act. The silver bands binding Daniel's wrists hissed and fell away, clattering loudly onto the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a final judgment. The Vortorok roared again, louder, deeper, shaking the walls with its fury. It lowered its body, muscles rippling, claws digging into the stone floor. Daniel's legs trembled, but he planted his feet firmly. He had no weapon, no armor, no training, nothing but his will to survive, and the fire in his chest that told him he could not fall. Not here, not while she was watching. The queen leaned back into her throne. Her voice was calm, but every word was sharp as a blade. Show us, human. Show us if your love is truth or nothing. The Vortorok lunged with a roar that split the chamber, and Daniel charged forward to meet it. The Vortorok lunged forward with terrifying speed. Its four arms swung out wide, claws slicing through the air with a screech that echoed across the chamber. The ground shook under its massive weight as it slammed down, stone cracking beneath its talons. Daniel dove aside, rolling across the floor as the beast's claws smashed down where it stood a heartbeat before. The impact shook the chamber, shards of stone scattering like shattered glass. The crowd gasped as the human scrambled to his feet, his chest heaving. He had no weapon, no armor, only his bare hands. The Vortorok roared, its long jaws opening wide, rows of glowing teeth glistening with saliva. It charged again, its speed shocking for a creature its size. Daniel barely managed to throw himself backward, the wind of its claws whipping across his face. His body screamed at him to run, to hide, to give up, but he forced his legs to move, to keep him alive. He ducked behind one of the crystal pillars lining the chamber. The beast's claws smashed into it, sending cracks spidering across the glowing surface. Daniel stumbled back, his heart pounding. From the throne, the queen watched in silence. Her silver eyes glowed faintly as she studied every move, every breath he took. There was no pity in her gaze, only judgment. Aelira, however, leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice lost under the beast's roar. Her eyes burned with fear. She wanted to leap down to help him, but she knew her mother's wrath would fall on her if she dared. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't fight this monster head-on. One blow from its claws would tear him apart. He needed to think, to move, to find a weakness. The Vortorok turned its burning eyes on him. It sniffed the air, then roared again, charging forward with its claws raised. Daniel sprinted to the side, sliding under the creature's swing. For an instant, he was beneath it, close enough to see the ridges in its armored plates, to smell the heat rising off its body. There, he thought, between the plates. That's the weakness. The beast spun faster than he expected, one of its claws slashing across his shoulder. Pain exploded in his arm, hot blood staining his shirt. Daniel staggered but stayed on his feet. The court gasped. Some guards murmured in alien tongues, already expecting his death. But Daniel gritted his teeth. "Not yet," he muttered to himself. The Vortorok struck again, hammering down with both front claws. Daniel dove forward, rolling under the beast's chest. His hands grabbed at the small gap between two armor plates on its belly. He drove his fist into it with all his strength. The creature roared in pain, stumbling back as sparks of glowing blood sprayed onto the floor. Aelira gasped, her eyes wide. The court erupted into noise, shock, disbelief. No human had ever harmed a Vortorok. The queen's face did not change, but her silver eyes narrowed slightly. Daniel pulled back, breathing hard, his knuckles bleeding from the strike. The Vortorok was hurt, but not stopped. It snarled, lowering its body, its eyes blazing with fury. Daniel wiped blood from his face with his sleeve. His body ached, his lungs burned, but his mind was clear. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's finish this." The beast charged again, claws flashing. Daniel dodged left, then right, barely escaping each strike. Every move cost him strength. Every second drained his body. But he held on, forcing his legs to move, his heart to beat. Then, in a sudden leap, the Vortorok raised its claws high, aiming to crush him. Daniel dropped flat, the claws smashing into the stone just above his head. Before the beast could pull back, Daniel surged upward, driving his shoulder into its chest. With his other hand, he slammed his fist into the gap between plates again and again. The Vortorok screamed, a deafening roar that shook the entire chamber. Its body twisted, trying to throw him off, but Daniel clung to it like a drowning man to driftwood. Aelira's voice finally broke through. "Daniel!" she cried out, no longer caring who heard. Her violet eyes shone with terror and hope. The queen's gaze flickered toward her daughter, then back to human. Daniel roared in defiance, slamming his fist again and again into the creature's weakness. Glowing blood sprayed across his arms, burning his skin like acid. His muscles screamed, his bones ached, but he did not stop. With a final strike, the Vortorok collapsed, its massive body crashing to the floor with a thunderous crack. The entire hall shook with the impact. Silence followed. Thick, heavy, absolute silence. Daniel staggered back, barely able to stand, his chest heaving with every breath. His arms dripped with glowing blood, his shirt torn, his face bruised. But he was alive. The Vortorok lay still at his feet, defeated. The court was stunned. Guards stared wide-eyed. Nobles whispered in disbelief. Never had they seen such a thing. Daniel turned slowly toward the queen. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "Is that enough proof?" For the first time, the queen's silver eyes flickered, not with anger, not with scorn, but with something else, something unreadable. And though she said nothing, Daniel saw it. The faintest crack in her unshakable mask. The Vortorok's body lay broken on the stone floor, glowing blood pooling around its claws. The echoes of its fall still rumbled faintly through the vast chamber. Daniel stood trembling, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. His arms were streaked with glowing wounds, his shirt torn, his body aching in every bone, but he was alive. Silence ruled the court. Dozens of alien eyes stared down at him from every side. Some were wide with disbelief. Others burned with anger. None had expected the human to still be standing. Slowly, Daniel lifted his head toward the throne. "I survived," he said, his voice hoarse but clear. "You asked for proof. Is this enough?" The queen did not move at once. She sat high upon her crystalline throne, her silver eyes locked on him. Her expression was unreadable, her rich crown catching the glow of the chamber lights. For a long moment, she said nothing. The court held its breath. Then, a voice rose from the crowd. One of the nobles, his long body wrapped in flowing robes of shimmering green, stepped forward. His voice was sharp and cold. "This is a trick. He is no warrior. He cannot be allowed to live, let alone claim the princess. The beast must have faltered, or the gods favored him. But he is still human, fragile, short-lived, unworthy." A murmur of agreement swept through the court. Other nobles shouted their protests, their voices rising like a storm. Guards shifted uneasily, their weapons clinking against their armor. Aelira stood suddenly, her violet eyes blazing. "Enough!" she cried. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You saw what he did. You all saw it. He faced a trial of warriors, and he lived. No one may call that weakness." The nobles hissed, their anger turning now toward her. Some bowed in mock respect. Others glared openly. Aelira did not flinch. She turned her gaze to her mother. "Mother," she said, her voice steady though her chest rose with sharp breaths. "You gave him the trial. He faced it. He did what no human has ever done. Will you deny even your own judgment?" The queen's eyes flickered toward her daughter, then back to Daniel. She rose slowly from her throne, and instantly the court fell silent again. Her steps were measured, her long form moving with perfect grace. She stopped at the edge of the platform where the Vortorok's corpse lay, her glowing eyes studying Daniel's broken body. "You live," she said at last, her voice smooth but heavy with meaning. "And by living, you have done what many of my own people could not. That cannot be ignored." Daniel's knees almost buckled with relief, but he forced himself to remain standing. He had to, not for himself, but for Lyra, who still watched him with trembling hands. But then the queen's voice hardened again. "Survival is not proof of worthiness. Survival shows only that you refuse to die. It does not yet show why my daughter should give her heart to you. It does not yet show why I should risk my people's future by allowing you to stand at her side." Daniel swallowed hard. His throat burned, but his voice did not shake. "Then tell me what else I must do." A ripple of surprise moved through the court. Some nobles laughed bitterly. Others hissed in anger. To them, the human should already be dead, and yet he asked for more. The queen's gaze did not waver. "Your body has been tested," she said. "Now your spirit must be weighed. Love is not only blood and survival. Love is sacrifice. Tomorrow at dawn, you will face the second trial. Not of strength, not of claws, but of truth. If your spirit fails, no blade, no courage, no word will save you." She turned back toward her throne, her long robes gliding across the glowing floor. The chamber's veins of light pulsed slowly, as if in rhythm with her command. "Until then," she said coldly, "the human will be held in the stone cells. Let him reflect on his choices. Let him ask himself if his love is still worth the pain." Two guards moved forward. Their glowing spears crossed before Daniel. He was too weak to resist. They grabbed his arms and dragged him toward the doors at the far end of the hall. "Daniel!" Lyra's voice broke through the silence. She rushed to the edge of the throne steps, her violet eyes wide with fear. "Hold on. Do not give up. No matter what they do, hold on to me." The guards pulled him away, but Daniel turned his head just enough to meet her gaze one last time. His lips curved in the faintest smile. "Always," he whispered. The doors closed behind him with a deep, echoing boom, leaving Lyra staring into the silence of the hall. The queen returned to her throne. Her silver eyes glowed faintly as she looked down at her daughter. For the briefest instant, there was something almost human in her gaze, a shadow of thought, of conflict, of hesitation. Then it was gone. The stone cells were carved deep into the mountain beneath the alien palace. The air was cold and heavy, and the walls glowed faintly with veins of dim blue crystal. The light pulsed slowly, like the beat of a tired heart. Daniel sat on the rough floor, his back against the wall. His body ached from the battle with the Vortorok. His arms were covered in cuts, and his shoulder throbbed with pain. But worse than the wounds was the silence. The silence pressed in from every side, broken only by the distant drip of water. He closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe. "I survived the beast. I can survive this. I have to." But doubt whispered in the back of his mind. The queen's words echoed. Your spirit must be weighed. Love is sacrifice. What would the next trial demand? How could he prove something so deep, so human, to a queen who believed him unworthy? Footsteps broke the silence. The heavy door creaked open, and a tall alien guard stepped inside. His armor was dark, his eyes glowing faintly under his helmet. In his hand, he carried a small tray. Without a word, the guard set the tray down in front of Daniel. On it was a bowl of steaming liquid, glowing faintly purple, and a piece of bread-like food that shimmered slightly under the crystal light. Daniel looked at it, but did not touch it. "Poison?" he asked dryly. The guard tilted his head, his face unreadable. Then, to Daniel's surprise, he spoke in rough but clear human tongue. "No poison. Food." His voice was deep and strange, as if two tones spoke at once. Daniel blinked. "You speak my language?" The guard's eyes flickered faintly. "Some of us learn. We listen. We watch." Daniel hesitated, then took the bowl and sipped the liquid. It was warm, salty, and filled his body with a strange heat that eased his aches. He ate the bread slowly, his eyes never leaving the guard. Why help me? Daniel asked at last. The guard's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. You killed the Vortorok. Few can do that, even fewer humans. Daniel gave a faint smile. So you respect me now? The guard was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, respect is not the same as trust. You are still human, fragile, short-lived, but you are different from the others I have seen. You did not run. You fought. That is remembered. Daniel studied him, then nodded. What's your name? The guard hesitated, then spoke a name that sounded like a low vibration, almost unpronounceable. Seeing Daniel struggle to repeat it, the guard added, in your tongue, call me Varric. Varric, Daniel repeated. Thank you for the food, for the words. The guard gave no answer. He turned and left, the heavy door slamming shut again. Daniel leaned back against the wall, the warmth of the food still in his chest. It wasn't much, but it was something, a small light in the dark. Hours passed. Daniel did not know how many. The glow of the crystals never changed, never faded. Time had no meaning here. His mind drifted between pain, exhaustion, and memory. He remembered Earth, the wide skies, the smell of rain, the laughter of his friends. And he remembered Lyra, her violet eyes, her quiet smile, the way her hand had rested on his arm as if it belonged there. He whispered her name into the silence. Lyra. The sound of footsteps came again. Daniel looked up quickly, hoping it was Varric, but instead it was her. Lyra slipped into the cell, her cloak hiding her form, her face pale in the crystal light. Behind her, Varric stood in the shadows, his hand resting on his spear, but his head bowed slightly. He had let her in. Daniel, she whispered, rushing to his side. Her hands touched his face, his shoulder, tracing every wound with trembling fingers. You're hurt. I've been worse, he said, forcing a smile. You shouldn't be here. If your mother finds out... I don't care, she said fiercely. Her violet eyes burned with emotion. I had to see you. I had to know you're still alive. Daniel reached up and took her hand. I am, because of you. Every time I wanted to give up, I saw your face. That's what kept me standing. Her eyes softened, filling with tears. She leaned closer, pressing her forehead to his. I'm so sorry for what she's doing to you. The trials, the pain, it's all because of me. No, Daniel whispered firmly. It's because I chose you. I chose to love you, even knowing the cost. That's not your fault. That's mine. For a long moment, they stayed like that, silent, their foreheads pressed together. Then Lyra pulled back, her eyes filled with fear. The second trial, it will not be like the first. It will test more than your body. It will test your heart, your soul. I don't know what for it will take, but please, Daniel, whatever happens, don't let her break you. Daniel squeezed her hand. She won't. Not as long as I have you. Varric cleared his throat softly, reminding them of his presence. Lyra reluctantly pulled away, her cloak hiding her face again. I'll see you at dawn, she whispered, her voice trembling. No matter what happens, remember, you are not alone. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her. Daniel leaned back against the wall, his heart pounding. The fear of the coming trial was real, sharp as any blade. But Lyra's words, her touch, had burned away the worst of his doubt. He would face the trial. He would face anything, because his love was real, and he would make even the queen herself see it. At dawn, the guards came for Daniel. Their armored feet echoed across the stone cells as they unlocked his door. The crystals in the walls pulsed brighter, as if the whole mountain knew what was coming. Daniel stood slowly, every muscle stiff and aching, but his eyes steady. Varric was among the guards. For a brief moment, their gazes met. Varric gave the faintest nod, not of comfort, not of pity, but of respect. The guards led Daniel through long tunnels that twisted upward until they reached the great throne chamber once more. The Vortorok's body had been removed, but its dark stain still marked the stone floor. The court was gathered again, nobles whispering, eyes sharp and hungry for spectacle. Lyra stood to one side, her cloak drawn tight around her. Her violet eyes searched for him the moment he entered, her fear plain even as she tried to hide it. The queen rose from her throne. Her silver eyes glowed in the dim light. Her voice carried across the hall, smooth and commanding. "The first trial tested your body," she said. "You survived where others would have fallen. But survival proves only the will to live. Love, however, is not survival alone. Love is surrender. Love is sacrifice. Today we test not your strength, but your truth." She raised one long hand, and the chamber floor shifted. Crystals rose from the ground in a wide circle, their glow forming a shimmering cage. Daniel was guided inside, the barrier humming faintly as he stepped into its light. Across from him, another figure appeared, Alira. She was pulled forward by two guards, her hands bound by glowing cords. She looked at Daniel with wide eyes, her lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came. Daniel's stomach dropped. "What is this?" he demanded, turning toward the queen. The queen's expression was calm, her ridged crown gleaming. "The trial of spirit is simple. You will speak your truth here, under the light of the crystals. The light cannot be deceived. Lies burn, truth endures. But words alone are not enough. You must prove what you claim with choice and sacrifice." The crystals pulsed brighter. Daniel could feel their hum in his chest, pressing against his heartbeat. The queen's voice rang out again. "You claim to love my daughter. Then choose. Speak the truth of why, and prove it. If your truth is shallow, the crystals will tear it from you. If your sacrifice is false, both you and my daughter will pay the price." Gasps spread through the court. Even Alira's face went pale. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He looked at Alira, then at the queen. His throat tightened, but he forced his voice out steady. "I love her," he said. The crystals flared bright, their light surrounding him like fire. Pain seared across his skin, testing the words. He gritted his teeth, but the crystals did not consume him. The light dimmed slightly, accepting his claim. "Why?" the queen pressed. Her voice was sharp, demanding. "Why risk your life, your people, your future for her?" Daniel closed his eyes. He thought of Alira's hand on his arm, her defiance in the court, her whispered words in the stone cells. He thought of her courage, her kindness, her fire. "Because she makes me better than I am," he said, his voice raw. "Because when I am with her, I see a future worth fighting for. Not a future of war or fear, but of hope. I don't care if she's alien. I don't care if I am human. She is my heart, and I would give everything for her." The crystals flared again. The pain shot deeper this time, clawing through his chest, burning his lungs. Daniel screamed but did not stop. His words held firm. The light pulsed, then steadied, as if drinking in his truth. Alira cried out, struggling against her bonds. Tears streamed down her face. The queen's eyes narrowed. "Words are not enough. Prove it." Another crystal rose between Daniel and Alira. On it lay a glowing blade, sharp and alien in design. Its edge shimmered with deadly energy. The queen's voice was cold. "One cut of this blade will mark you forever. Take it in your own hand. Spill your own blood. If your love is real, the crystal will know. If it is not, then you will die." Daniel staggered forward, his body weak but his resolve steady. He reached out and lifted the blade. Its hum vibrated through his bones. He turned it toward his arm. "Daniel, no!" Alira screamed. Her voice was broken, desperate. He met her eyes. "For you," he whispered. Then he drew the blade across his forearm. Pain like fire shot through him, the wound glowing with burning light. He dropped to his knees, gasping, the blade clattering to the ground. The crystals flared violently, the chamber shaking with their power. The nobles shielded their eyes. The queen's silver gaze locked on him, sharp and searching. Then, slowly, the light dimmed. The wound still bled, but Daniel lived. The crystals had accepted his sacrifice. The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, her voice wavered just slightly. "You speak truth." Gasps echoed across the hall. Some nobles shouted in protest. Others murmured in disbelief. Alira fell to her knees, tears streaming as she tried to reach him. The guards held her back, but her voice carried clear. "You see, Mother? You see what he is willing to give." Daniel, weak and trembling, lifted his head toward the throne. His voice was hoarse but steady. "I told you, my love is real. Nothing you do can break it." The queen stood frozen, her silver eyes unreadable. For a heartbeat, the mass of her authority cracked. And in her silence, the entire court trembled. The chamber was still. The crystals no longer glowed with fury, but with a soft, steady light, their hum fading into silence. Daniel knelt in the circle, blood dripping from his arm, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. He was pale, weak, but his eyes did not waver. He looked up at the throne, waiting. The court had fallen into chaos. Some nobles shouted angrily, their voices sharp and filled with scorn. Others whispered in awe, stealing glances at the human who had done what no one thought possible. Guards tightened their grips on their spears, unsure whether to prepare for violence or bow to a new truth. At the heart of it all, the queen stood unmoving, her silver eyes locked on Daniel. A Lyra fought against her bonds, her voice breaking through the uproar. "Mother, you cannot deny it any longer. You saw what he did. You felt the crystals accept him. His love is real." Her words echoed, bouncing off the chamber walls. But the queen did not respond. She remained silent, her gaze unreadable. Daniel pushed himself shakily to his feet. His legs trembled, but he stood tall. He raised his voice, hoarse but steady. "I face your beast. I face your trial of spirit. I bled for her, and I would bleed again. You want to know why I love your daughter. And I showed you. I don't need your blessing, your majesty. I only need her." A hush fell over the chamber. The queen's fingers tightened on the arms of her throne. For the first time, her composure cracked. Her eyes narrowed, then softened, then burned again with something no one could name. She looked at her daughter, at the tears in her violet eyes, the fire in her voice, the desperate hope in her heart. Then she looked back at Daniel, this fragile, wounded human who refused to break. The silence stretched until the court itself seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the queen spoke. Her voice was softer now, but still sharp enough to cut through the stillness. "I demanded truth, and I received it. I demanded sacrifice, and you gave it. You are not like other humans. You are stubborn, foolish, reckless." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "And yet, you are also unyielding. And unyielding love is a thing even I cannot command or destroy." Gasps rippled through the court. Alyra's lips parted, her eyes wide. "Mother!" The queen raised a hand, silencing her. She stepped down from the throne, her tall form gliding across the glowing floor until she stood just before Daniel. Her silver gaze pierced into him, searching one last time for weakness, for lies. He did not flinch. At last, the queen whispered, "You love her." Daniel nodded, his voice steady despite the pain. "With everything I am." The queen's eyes closed for a long, silent moment. When they opened again, the steel within them had softened, just enough for the court to see. Then the only one left speechless is I. The chamber erupted. Nobles shouted in disbelief, some crying betrayal. Others bowing their heads in reluctant respect. Guards looked to one another, uncertain. Alyra gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks as her hands were finally unbound. She ran to Daniel, throwing her arms around him. He staggered but held her tightly, their foreheads pressing together once more. The queen turned, her tall frame rising back to its full height. Her voice rang across the chamber with finality. "Let it be known, this human has proven himself. He is no longer just an outsider. He is one who has faced our trials and endured. And though I do not yet know what this means for my people, I cannot deny my daughter's heart, or his." The nobles fell silent. None dared to defy her word. Daniel closed his eyes, relief washing through him like a tide. Alyra's hand clung to his, her smile breaking through her tears. For the first time since arriving in this alien world, Daniel felt not like a prisoner, not like prey, but like a man who had carved his place with truth and sacrifice. The queen returned to her throne, her face once more calm, though her eyes lingered on them both, behind the mask of authority. There was something different now, not acceptance, not yet, but something dangerously close to respect. And perhaps, just perhaps, the faintest spark of hope. The chamber lights dimmed, the trial complete. The court would argue, the nobles would whisper, and the future was uncertain. But for Daniel and Aelira, none of that mattered. They had won.